Hi, my name's Austin, and we are talking Cite 6 today in Senate Bill 10191, or Senate Bill 191 we call it, which is the Educator Effectiveness Law, and that includes Cite Standards 1 through 5 and Cite 6. Today we're going to try and focus on both an overview of Cite 1 through 5 and Cite 6, but we're going to dive more into how does Cite 6 work, what are the numbers behind it, and where are some of the logistics that happen. So Cite 1 through 5 are all the other professional standards that are observed by your principal or you can submit as evidence. And Senate Bill 191 calls this out as 50% of educator effectiveness. The other 50% that the legislation calls out is Cite Standard 6, and we refer to this as student performance. And this is how students perform on assessments and the growth that they make. Now, Cite 6 in Douglas County several years ago was met over by a committee, and they decided to do a breakdown, and so they called out 40% as individual or individual attribution. And what this means is that these are the students that you work with, that you provide services for. Now the state also calls out you have to have both an individual and a collective section. So we have 10%, that is collective. And that collective section is typically where we put assessments like PARCC and CMAS, and they represent the school as a whole. The other option is for our specialized service professionals, also called SSPs, and this includes professions like speech-language pathologists, counselors, psychologists, social workers, and a few other categories. The state legislation still calls out 6 standards for these groups, and they have the 50%, that is the teacher performance or the educator's performance. However, for Cite 6, there is no requirement for both a collective and individual. So we created a Wilcox SSP model, which is 50% student performance. And what this means is that you do not take your school's performance on state assessments. You can, however, when you are selecting your rubric in Inspired, choose your school's model and have a 40-10 split, just like the other model showed for most teachers. In Douglas County School District, our Board of Education ties standards 1 through 5 to pay increases at the end of the year. Cite 6 is not tied to pay, and we are going to show you the specific equation that helps determine how those numbers are separated. But essentially you end up with 3 different scores. You end up with a score that is for Cite 1 through 5, that is tied to pay. You end up with a score for Cite 6, that is not tied to pay. And then we combine those scores according to Senate Bill 191. We divide them by 2 to represent the 50%, and you will receive a third overall score that influences going to other districts and some of the decisions that they make, but is tied to probationary and non-probationary status. So we want to show you how the numbers get worked out for Cite. So Cite 1 through 5 is determined by your evaluator and the evidence that you submit. So in this example, we're going to say that you received a 3 or proficient. For Cite 6, we're going to say that after you set your student learning objectives and we integrate the state data, that you came out with less than expected, that it was 2. So we would take those numbers, 3 plus 2 would equal 5. We would divide it by 2 to represent the 50%, and we would equal 2.5. Now the state requires that we only submit whole numbers, and so we use normal rounding rules, which means 2.5 would round up to 3, and 2.4 would round down to 2.